Hello, everyone. This is Dan Gwynn with Francis Schaeffer Studies, and this is the 10th edition of Speaking Truth to Tension podcast, the podcast of FrancisSchaefferStudies.org. And this episode's kind of fascinating. We are going to get into a little bit of discussion with a friend of mine who has brought to my attention some various things that are going on in the atheistic world. The atheistic camp is choosing to adopt some Christian principles, at least some of them are. And so we're going to talk about that, talk about some of the philosophies and nuance with the respect to that, and get into it. And so we'll jump right in. Hello, Don. Welcome to Speaking Truth to Tension. And this is, I'll mention for the watchers that this is not the unknown webcast. Usually it's the other way around. I'm on your show, but now you're on mine. It's great. So great to have you. We've enjoyed our friendship, I think, for many years now, being members of ISCA. Talking back and forth on various theological items, and even talk of Schaeffer and theology and things. So so glad to have you on, and especially for such an interesting topic. But so for people that don't know, Don is president of Midwest Christian Outreach, and he's founded that with his wife. That's correct, right?
Yep.
And then and also as current president of the EMNR, and I can never remember the exact
That's
acronym, so I'm going to leave that one to you.
that is Evangelical Missions to Non-Christian Religions. It's a recent change in name. It was originally founded as EMNR. Hmm. Oh, uh, it's to new religious movements. That's what it was. New religious evangelicals to new religious movements. And it was started out really for kind of ma and pa type apologetics ministries, small, to give them a place to gather, to share what they're doing with one another, and kind of build up the body of Christ that way. We've expanded to deal with other groups than just cults, so it's been interesting.
It's wonderful. I've enjoyed your podcast. I think it's quite interesting how you mix such deep topics with a little bit of humor, and feel like that's good salt and seasoning, if you will, for making some sort of commendation of the goodness of and benefits of the truth as you present it. So I appreciate what you guys are doing.
Well, it's kind of our view that truth is really important, as you know. We do serious topics, try to do this somewhat in depth. But if you don't inject some humor, it could just become intellectual banter. Uh, I think we have to have fun. And there are some who don't like our humor, and I laugh at them. No. uh, the, there are times we have to point out, look, there's six types of satire, five of which are in the Bible. So if it's good enough for the prophets and for the Savior, I think I can use it too.
Yeah, why not? I mean, commending the gospel. I'm not even opposed to using dad jokes, uh, which is kind of my favorite. You can tell I just told one to my daughter upstairs, and she didn't like it, and then left the room. So you got to make sure you're careful with those.
Well, you do. I like dad jokes, and Norm Geisler loves dad jokes. And when we met, that's how I knew we would be friends for the rest of his life. Is he was doing battle over the resurrection.
Mm.
Professor at Trinity was teaching that it was non-physical, And I was asked to go down and give him some assistance at a Cornerstone Festival. And so when I got there, I never met him before. We were on our way out to dinner, and as we're driving into town, we passed the seminary, and I heard him say, "That's the dead center of town." And I went, "We are going to be friends forever."
Yeah, he had a certain wit about him that was some people didn't ever encounter as much.
Right,
And I wasn't super close with him, but close enough where I rubbed shoulders with him, and he was very encouraging to me. Also, as I mentioned several times in other videos, the one thing he told me about Schaeffer, well, he actually told me two things. One, Schaeffer was prophetic, and two, he was wrong about Aquinas, and that was his opinion. I differ with that slightly, but I get what he was saying. And so it's always, I miss him. I miss Dr. Geisler. I think that he was such a wonderful contributor and inspired so many of us to carry the gospel, specifically in the area of scripture.
right,
What a champion with regard to scripture. I think he gave one of the most incredible lectures I'd ever heard on the defense of scripture and inerrancy that I think I'd ever heard before at one of his later lectures. And he just was always ready to defend uh, the Bible as truth.
right. He was a good scholar, and we had sort of a interesting partnership in many ways because he did the academic work, and I benefited from that. And I'm a street fighter, and so oftentimes he would call me and say, "Okay, I'm hearing this is going on in the church. What is it, and how do I respond?" And so
Mm,
we would talk that through because we have sort of different types of ministries. I'm the guy that goes to the Parliament of the World's Religions and Paganicon and hang out with others who go to Burning Man, for example, because that's where the unbelievers are at.
yeah.
Uh, and so, but I need the training from Dr. Geiser and others to process how's the best way to talk to them.
Hmm.
So you really need both.
Yeah. And I think if it's academic, you run the risk of it being ivory tower. And if you're too much in the just kind of street fighter mode, you could also miss the proper theology at times. And
Right.
so
Hmm.
having that proper balance, that's so significant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So hey, let's get to the topic that we were talking about. We were getting into this a little bit, and I decided to kind of bill it as atheist for Christ, and that's a little bit of a joke, a little bit of a jab there, not 100%. Um, but let's talk about that. What are you seeing in this area? What are you seeing in the area of both atheists as well as like even pagans that are in some ways endorsing Christianity?
Well, um, I don't know that too many pagans are endorsing Christianity, unless it's progressive Christianity, they would do that. But atheist has been very interesting for me and a few others to watch because, of course, Richard Dawkins and others of the new atheists were working hard to demonstrate Christianity is false. It's just falsified. And so just go do something else. Uh, and they were doing pretty well at persuading even Christians to rethink their views of Christianity. And then we saw some pretty interesting things happening starting in around 2017 when one of the new atheists, Tom Holland, came out with his book Dominion. It's a powerful book. Uh, he is a historian, and so even though he was an atheist and still is an atheist to my knowledge, he was a historian first, and he went back and he started doing research on the transformation of culture from the first century to today and what brought that about. And to his surprise, it was Christianity. You have a really mean culture in the first few centuries of the church experience that it was birthed in and grew up in. Women were not highly regarded. Human life was not overly valuable. And he was surprised to find out that it was Christianity that elevated the role of women, that suddenly saw children, even newborns or even preborns, as having value. Because, of course, we believe in the Imago Dei, that God's on each of us. We are created in His image.
Hmm.
Now, that does not mean, just for clarity, for those who are unaware of what this means, that doesn't mean we look like God. He's not a physical being, but it does mean we have His communicable attributes. So, creativity, love, those kinds of things, His communicable attributes.
Hmm.
And we have value because we have His communicable attributes. So, as we follow that through, which he did, he discovered that even in the fourth century, the last, what we'll call as the last pagan emperor, Julian, we call him Julian the Apostate, who was trying to restart the pagan rituals, the pagan temples, financing them, hiring the priests and getting them trained. And he did something that we might call the first seeker-sensitive religious movement. Uh, he could not get it moving because no one was that interested. Christianity was now the new thing, and culture was gravitating toward it. So he wrote a letter to the priests in Galatia saying, look, if we're going to be successful, we have to start acting like the Christians. We have to start caring for the poor, caring for the hungry. They provide hostels for not only their people, but ours as well. And so we need to do the same thing. In other words, we need to watch what those Christians are doing and do the same thing. Today we have a church going, we have to act like the unbelievers in order to get them into our church. They're really saying the same thing there. That's kind of interesting. So anyway, he tracks that down, and then he starts demonstrating that even with the church's flaws down through the centuries, and there are many, it is what has brought us Western culture. So our morality and ethics, our values, are firmly rooted in Christianity and have been for 1700 years. He also noticed that with the loss of those Christian connections, you are also losing, guess what? Morals, values, ethics, because there's nothing to root them in. So shortly after that, Richard
Mhm.
Dawkins comes out with just a 34 word meme that basically says, Christianity wasn't so bad compared to what's coming. Uh, and so we might need to rethink this. And he began rethinking that. So Tom Holland then began going to church, even though he's not a Christian.
Hmm.
And he calls himself a Christian atheist. Richard Dawkins more recently started, guess what? Going to church and defending Christianity as essential and necessary for the continuation of Western culture, because
Wow.
without it, you don't have Western culture.
Hmm.
So they're not arguing that God exists. They are arguing, though, that we need Christianity.
That's fascinating. And in Schaeffer's thought, Schaeffer called this the Christian ethos, that and really that it was impossible for the non. I mean, he states quite often it's impossible for the non-Christian to be consistent with their belief system.
Right.
Otherwise, if it led to or if they followed it to its natural end, it would lead to places they really don't want to go or in places where they don't want to live. Their culture, decline in morals, et cetera, et cetera. And so the in this way, I think that if Schaeffer was standing in front of Dawkins right now and hearing him say that, I think he would point out to them, I want to commend you on your inconsistency with your own belief system. because you are being more consistent with Christianity and endorsing at least part of the truth. And because that is exactly the benefits. Schaeffer called it, especially with respect to um, the principles and freedoms of the Reformation. He uses this phrase repeatedly in his works: freedom that does not lead to chaos. And when you think about it like that, that is the foundational aspect of what the biblical ethos and the Christian ethos has brought the Western civilization: freedom that does not lead to chaos. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and we have not. You have to pardon me. Sometimes my brain just short circuits. It goes with my age, I think. But uh, James Lindsay, for example, was one of the new atheists. Now he's shifted. Now he's agnostic, and in part he's become agnostic because he and a friend of his, another philosopher, started fighting CRT. Okay, critical race theory. The
Interesting.
dilemma they were having, both of them, is they were not being well received in academia where they were teaching, and they ended up doing something pretty odd, making alliances with Christian apologists
Huh.
uh, to do this battle. And they were surprised because the ones who embraced them were Christian apologists, while they're being shunned by the open minded in academia. It's,
Hmm.
it's shocked them. Nobody insisted you had to become a Christian. They basically said, look, we are interested in truth. We are willing to walk alongside you, even though you're a non believer, because we are interested in truth. And right now, you're dealing with an issue that is truth. And we will pray that you become a believer. And they went, okay. And so
Hmm.
that has been pretty interesting. So James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose and several others who are either atheist or agnostic have a fairly big following by Christians on the issue of critical race theory.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think too. That's all. When you step on this one, you obviously step and put your toe into politics to some degree, and it's almost impossible to avoid. Um, be, because that has permeated so much of society and especially academia, this pushing of CRT, which is kind of am I right in saying it's a neo-Marxism?
it is absolutely.
Yeah. And that push that elevates race and other factors over just simple aspects of merit, uh, I think is maybe one of the driving things I think that would be different than how we view it as or view life and uh, moving forward in life as Christians.
Yeah, well, it does drive. It comes out of Franklin schools, which is Marxist, and Fabianism. So, and that sort of moved its way across the waters into the universities in the 1930s, especially, and has continued there and has been growing ever since then. So it has become the thing that all universities of note were teaching,
Hmm.
uh, and because that's how you transform culture. In fact, um, John Dewey, he founded the Teachers University, excuse me. He also wrote Human Manifesto 1 and 2, and he argued that if we want to transform civilization into Marxism, we have to do it through the school system. We can't. They're not gonna rise up and revolt against the government like we've seen in other places. So they started to do that and infected the schools, which infects politics, because the end is man is the most important being on the planet.
Hmm.
Essentially, what Marxism is. Someone has pointed out that Marx was basically a Gnostic. Now, he didn't believe in God, but he did believe that he had supernatural sort of knowingness in order to guide everyone through the economics, which then affect classes and all those sort of things. So they're all really tied together. It's a religion, and it's a religion where man is elevated as the final authority on all things.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's a redoing. One of the ways we refer to this is we all understand what happened at the Tower of Babel. God said, I want you to do this. Man said, nah, we're really not into that. And so we're gonna build an edifice to ourselves. And God said, try that one. Confounded their languages, and they separated as a result of that. But that's what they were doing, is creating an edifice to themselves. What we're seeing today, which is why we're calling it the age of re-enchantment, is the Tower of Babel 2.0.
Hmm.
Now, it's not blocks, it's not bricks like they were using, but it is all of the elements that drives society. It is the finances. It is uh, science. It is we control the planet. These are all have become political issues because the driving force is we as humans have all of the power. God doesn't even exist.
So maybe so if we could step back a little and maybe try to connect some dots. So you have, atheists who tend to be Darwinist
Correct.
in their thinking, and yet we know that a lot of Marxism had actually flourished and adopted a Darwinist approach. At least that's some of the things that I've seen
Okay.
documented, specifically some of the influences of Darwinism uh, playing out in kind of a real world survival of the fittest in Marxism. But then, so as a reply to survival of fittest to overcome that, elevating classes and elevating this principle of the oppressor and the oppressed. Uh, how do you think that the atheists gel with all that thought? I mean, uh, so you're seeing them not take it to the extremes that Marxism does, and then sort of turn back and try to do something different.
Well, yeah, I don't think the atheist ever took Marxism as a description for the all. Let's see, everything in the universe, but as an economic system primarily.
Hmm.
And as we kind of go down through history, we have a time where people were uncertain that there was anything like truth. First century, my friend Bill Hunsberger says often that in the first century, the average person believed all truth claims were equally true. Philosophers believed all truth claims were equally false, and politicians thought all truth claims were equally useful. So when Pilate says, "What is truth?" he's actually asking a valid question because no one really knows what it is. As we moved down, though, and Christianity began taking central stage, there was a belief that there was truth, and you could know it in the Bible through your priests and so forth. That went on for quite a long time until we came to the age of enlightenment. And then philosophers became the standard of truth. And so there's truth, but you have to go to it is the philosophers that are telling you what it is. Then you come into Darwinism, and there's still a belief in truth, but who's the teller of truth? Scientists are the teller of truth. And so now they are directing culture and how to think and behave and so forth. And that's kind of where you're at with the atheists. They had bought into that. As you move on, then it moves to um, uh, modernism, and that's this whole area is modernism, then into postmodernism. Well, postmodernism is sort of interesting because there's really you don't not really any knowable truth. Uh, you can only know what you interpret it to mean. You can't know what it is, and so science starts taking a bit of a back seat to certain kinds of questions. We move through that area into um, celebrityism. Now, if you want to know truth, the celebrities, the actors, are coming out to tell you what's true. All
Hmm.
of that is now gone. We've left that in part because all through that you had attention. So you were talking about intention here, attention of Christian morals and ethics. It was still rooted in that, in spite of all of these other changes about where you get truth. It still was rooted in Christian ethics and morals. Unfortunately, without God, because without God, those things can't hold together by themselves. So we have now moved in from that into the age of re-enchantment, where everything is based on how I feel about it. I am the God of decisions. I choose what's true and what's false. I we believe in scientism, maybe an idea that there might be science out there, but not science itself. And so I then can deny the biblical idea of gender because I don't feel like it's true for me. And so I can enchant myself. My feelings drive what's true. I don't have to listen to anybody else.
Hmm. So you really believe that the this enchantment movement is kind of a even a movement beyond postmodernism,
Oh, yeah.
and it's beyond even. I mean, because I feel like sometimes when I'm looking at both media and culture, I'll sometimes I see various people too that are uh, celebrities, and you do see somewhat of still cults of personalities that are
Right.
afloat.
Right.
Uh, but this, so how does this differ, I think, than postmodernism? Or are they, is it just an extension of
Mm,
postmodernist thought?
I don't know. I think it's a replacement of postmodernism, frankly.
Hmm.
Uh, um, because postmodernism, even though it was wrong, was still sort of an intellectual rigor was involved with it. In the age of re-enchantment, there's nothing intellectual about it, really. It is simply what I feel, how I believe life ought to be. And I can't even say there's an absolute. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
go to Paganicon um, each year, and I love Paganicon. What we discover is a large percentage that are there were raised in Christian churches. Some of them were asking difficult questions and not getting real answers, and so they went to something else. Some were in extremely legalistic situations, like a sort of Bill Gothard, and did not want to worship a god like that, which I totally agree. Um, but if you ask them, then what attracted you to Wicca? Without exception, they start out with this phrase: "Wicca for me is," and then fill in the blank, because there's no universal definition, understanding, or workings of Wicca. You make it up as you go.
Mhm.
And so everyone will have variations on their Wiccan beliefs and practices. Some will worship three or four gods, some will worship a dozen gods, some will include sex in their ceremonies, others will not. There's like, there's the only real connection between them is it isn't Christianity, and I can make it up as I go.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not postmodernism, even.
Yeah. It's more an area of mysticism for sure.
It is absolutely.
It reminds me a little bit of Schaeffer's notion of the upper story leap that happens in various schools of thought, where they're scholars or people go along and they eventually get frustrated with the things that they see before them, whether it's rationalism or wherever it's the realities in front of their face, and in order to escape, they will escape into other things, using other things, other vessels, means, whether that's drugs, whether that's some sort of mysticism or whatever, to escape reality and to begin to formulate something different. But one thing that I noted here too, though, with this re-enchantment is that some are turning back romantically and
Right.
accepting Christian notions as far as moral ethics or even societal ethics. Is that
Well,
right?
you have some groups that are calling themselves Christian witches. This is kind of a new phenomenon.
Hmm.
It's kind of small. In fact, we've looked at a couple of times. There's a small group that does conferences for Christian witches, but every time we look at it, it looks like it's about the same 30 people. So we're not sure how much of a grab is getting. And as you look into it, they like the idea of Christianity. They don't like the teachings of Christianity.
Hmm.
So we have a thing, and you may have seen us use this. We use it sometimes in our articles, and we have a little one of our satirical commercials. Is the good Jesus keeping seal of approval, kind of like the good housekeeping seal of approval.
Yeah.
And most groups use that. They will bring Jesus into their schema in some way or another. You see it, Islam. Yes, Jesus was a great prophet. You see it in Mormonism. Uh, yes, he's a God, and we can become God like him. Even Hinduism has Jesus in their ideas because it gives them validity in some way.
Yeah.
And as we've met with some witches who might, well, she's passed away now, but the founder of the Fellowship of Isis, she was from Ireland, uh, is her brother was a priest in the church there in Ireland, the state church. I forget which one it is, but and she was part of that as well. So they were theoretically Christian witches,
Hmm.
but really everything they did was in opposition to what sound biblical teaching is.
Yeah. So, what prohibits some forms of modern evangelicalism from going there? As you were talking, I was just remembering going to a family meeting one time, and it was actually one of my wife's relatives, um, and she mentioned to me that she went to a non-doctrinal church, and I just kind of sat there puzzled because everything I know about Christianity has a foundational aspect of doctrine to it. So if you remove the doctrine, what do you have left? And my thought is mysticism. But uh, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, without knowing about this particular church, it could be mysticism. It could be just a social club uh, where you're just reading books like a book club.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of things it could be. It could be a New Thought church, and they tend to not regard themselves as having doctrine per se, but then they're basically teaching that we are God.
Hmm.
Well, that's a doctrine,
Yeah.
right? So it's a little misleading because they don't have doctrine in the sense that they're affirming on paper Jesus is God, the Trinity is true, or anything like that, and yet they still have one. It's like the churches of Christ
Yeah.
will say no creed but Christ, except that's a creed.
Yeah. I have to interject, like, one of my favorite little questions I've asked before in some of my classes is I would like you to think an independent thought, not contingent upon anything else. Ready? Go. I mean, this is what we're trying, what we're basically what they're saying. I've got some feel good notion about Jesus in the sky, but even Jesus in the sky is something.
Right.
It's always based in some idea, some concept. And if you were to write it down in words, wouldn't that be a doctrine? And but I fear that sometimes our culture in some forms of evangelicalism has become so mystical in its approach to just the gospel only, as far as just preaching maybe evangelism without going to the deeper aspects of what the gospel actually means, as far as like personal holiness and sanctification and the application to your life in godliness and fervor, the love and grace and everything that comes with Christ, the true benefits beyond just believing in something vague.
Well, last night, as you're aware, we also do a Tuesday night study. Currently, Dr. Donald Williams is leading that, and we're going through his book, 95 Theses for a New Reformation. Very
Oh wow,
good
yeah.
book. And we were doing a chapter on pietism last night. Well, pietism early on had to do with holiness and holy living and worship of God.
Mhm.
Uh, Now, pietism really has become me centered. We do, quote, worship services, quote unquote, that are designed to make you have experiences where you feel close to God. They have nothing really to do with God or
Yeah,
holiness or worship. They have to do with being kind of emotionally charged.
yeah.
Well, that's false. And that's
Mhm.
back to what you're talking about. You have the same thing with uh, most do not realize how deeply rooted new thought ideas are in the church, particularly in word faith churches and New Apostolic Reformation, but others as well, and have seeker sensitive churches, for example, in part come through new thought ideas. That's pretty profound because it's going to then tend to make you move more toward mysticism because you're not
Yeah.
looking for objective truth. You're looking for experience. You're looking for answers from within. You're not looking for answers necessarily from God.
Yeah, and I do also think that sometimes there's another parallel there in philosophy, possibly with existentialism, being that the putting the emphasis on um, my experience over my true created uh, person. And so instead of they always what it used to say existence precedes essence, but when they say existence, they're talking about your um, what you think you are rather than what you truly are
Right.
defines your essence, and then that brings it all about. So it's interesting that it's on multiple fronts. I'm reminded too. My family and I were watching uh, Firefly. You ever heard of that it's kind of it's a space cowboy type episodes, and there was one series of it, and so they're flying around in these ships, and it's but they have kind of cowboy outfits on, etc. It's kind of an interesting series, and one of the things that they did is after it ended the first series, and so they did a movie, and in the close, or one of the parts of the movie, this isn't the giving away everything, but in one part of the movie, there is uh, there's been a pastor that they call a shepherd that has a Bible with him throughout all of these episodes. He's kind of an interesting placement so he's kind of a holy man that travels with them, even though they're not necessarily holy, right? So it's
Right.
really kind of strange. But anyway, he dies in this movie, in the movie version. And as he's dying, he says, uh, he says to the guy, I don't care what you believe, just believe.
Ah,
And
just
I just was writhing in my chair, and my poor kids had to endure a nice lecture after the movie because I'm just like, this is the problem. Is like, and but to my kids, um, excitement, they and to praise of them, they understood right away what the problem of that was. They had all developed filters and going, no, you're not believing in anything then.
right.
And so yeah,
Well, right. You see it in culture, but you look at that and you go, okay, they're not believers. So, they're going to believe whatever they want to believe. My dilemma is how do you handle the church, which is in the same situation? Now, I would suggest that nearly all of us develop our worldview by osmosis.
mm,
It seeps into our brain through the peer group we're with, the books we read, the television we watch, the films we watch, generally unchecked. We don't ask the big questions about it. Now, you're a philosopher, you do that as you watch a movie like Firefly, for example. When my kids were growing up, my my son would say sometimes as a young lad, "You're always trying to get to the point of everything." And of course we were. I mean, we talked to the TV, we talked to the movies, we talked to the whatever. And so I took them to see um, The Matrix because I could teach them about Eastern philosophy. It's
oh,
a great
interesting.
movie. It's a fun movie,
Yeah,
but I challenged his thinking by saying, okay, here's what this is, so that he's not imbibing on becoming an Eastern mystic. He's understanding this is what they're telling me is true through the story. And so he could resist developing that in his worldview. We don't do enough of that.
yeah.
I I used to I had some churches in Colorado that would bring me down before high school graduation each year, and we spend 3 days just dealing with worldviews. And I explain what worldviews are, I tell them what the worldviews available are, how they work together. At the end of which we would have a movie day where we would watch, usually Hidalgo. I like that one because there's three worldviews in the film.
Hmm. Hmm.
And after they watched it, we had our popcorn or whatever. They had to then tell me what the three worldviews were, whose worldview was the best, whose worldview was the worst, and whose worldview was most honorable. And they had to think about that for a long time because they hadn't quite paid attention to the story
Yeah.
until I started explaining, okay, the American Indian is the best worldview. It's the most embracing, it's the most uh, touches you most. You have better contact with the spirit beings that are guiding you. Uh, the Islamic worldview is the most honorable because it gave assent to the best worldview, and Christianity was the worst because they were liars and thieves.
It's just how it's portrayed, right? That's
I was portrayed in the film.
hmm.
Yeah. But that's how we're learning stuff. That's how most people learn stuff. They rarely stop to ask themselves the question, what is being communicated? What is the writer of the story, the director of the film, the one who's presenting at an event, what is their starting point? What is their worldview that they're conveying to me? Who asked that question? Me, you. Most people
Yeah,
don't, right?
yeah,
And when you start laying it out and people they start thinking about it, they go, well, or they'll tell me that something is true and I'll challenge it and I'll go, I'll give you an example. I was teaching introduction to religion class for a professor some years back. And when I got done, we did a Q&A time, and one of the young lads stands up and he has a question that he's thought about a lot, apparently. And he said, well, you can't trust the Bible. There are so many contradictions in it. And I said, that I'm glad. That's a great question you've raised. And I had my Jimmy Swaggart floppy Bible in hand. And I offered it to him, and I said, I would be glad if you could show me a few of those. I heard that it is true, but so far I haven't really seen them. And he backed up like it was on fire, and he said, "Well, I haven't really read it." I said, "Oh, okay. Well, then how would you know that it has contradictions?" Well, I heard there's contradictions. Okay, and who did you hear that from? Well, I don't really remember. And so I said, doesn't that scare you even a little bit that you're basing your entire destiny based on information that you don't know where it came from, you don't know if it is true, and you don't know if the individual it came from is trustworthy, and you're making a decision based on that? Most of us do exactly that,
Yeah.
right? We don't ask the big questions. How do we know?
Yeah, and if you're not stopping to analyze your own thought, I mean, that's kind of what Schaeffer talks about with his notions of presupposition, that if a lot of people carry around presupposition and don't really know that they have presuppositions about the world, they don't know the worldview that they carry with them, that is acting as like a filter over their eyes or lenses, if you will, to see the world in a certain light and with certain shades. And I think that's uh, where we can be such a help to not only non-believers, but also Christians to grow in their faith if they stop to actually process
Right.
really what we believe and why we believe and then uh, how we can hold to these things. Um, I think too, I always impress upon people that we're in this life, we're finite people, so we're not looking for exhaustive truth, but we are looking for substantial truth that's
Yes.
enough.
Right.
And if you haven't examined the evidence at all, then you don't have substantial truth. You just have something that is kind of a basically a glass floor that's ready to be broken, and it needs to be examined. All right, so our conversation with Don Veinot, I think, was very beneficial, and it brought to mind a lot of different things that Schaeffer had said, and specifically some of these things that we know to be true with respect to just general belief as believers that Schaeffer has pointed out. And so as we look at some of these, the new atheism really is a lot like what Schaeffer describes that was going on in his day. Some of this, basically the upper story or lower story concepts, basically faith, anything that's not basically connected with, in their mind, the physical state becomes kind of irrational upper story logic. And so things like faith, non-rationality, no contact with the cosmos, science, or history. So it's anything that's out there. So in some ways, they've separated the science from like social science from regular science as far as their belief in God, and then pushed this concept into that upper story, it seems. And upper story with Schaeffer is a term, and these are his definitions actually. You can find these in his complete works. Upper story, a term used to denote that which in modern thinking deals with significance of meaning, but which is not open to contact with verification by the world of facts, which constitutes the lower story. So the facts, the lower story, the physical realm, and these upper story concepts. And then likewise, his term romantic, he means a view of life that has no basis in fact, being the product of an exaggerated optimism. So when this new atheist that is adopting this principle that Christianity is good, yet they still don't believe, they're accepting some of the things that Christianity brings, as far as freedom that doesn't lead to chaos, as Schaeffer says, but they're doing it romantically, in a sense that, well, this is what's good for us, even though it really doesn't make sense to them, or it isn't even truth to them. It's just that this part about it is okay. And so it's a walking contradiction, I give you, and it's hard to even quantify sometimes when you're thinking about these things. How can they even get there? But it's not unlike the new theology that Schaeffer was encountering in his time. And he says of them, these men choose to call themselves Christian atheists. They are atheists in the classical sense of that word, and they are Christians only in the sense that they have adopted for themselves Bonhoeffer's definition of Christ, the man of others. They really differ little from today's optimistic humanist. So in Schaeffer's time, he's witnessing people that are adopting the new theology, basically calling themselves Christian, but merging the concepts of non-belief with theology in such a way that actually allows them to sort of take advantage or cheat on some of the Christian dynamics and accept those things without accepting the whole. And it's a peculiarity, because Christianity obviously has its core tenets of faith and doctrine, its core principles of what is taught. Yet for people to come along and say, no, it doesn't have really doctrine, I can make it what I want, they're making their own religion. They're not making Christianity Christianity. They're doing it, they're making their own religion in the name of Christianity, and yet doing something completely different. And so what about these areas too of non-reason and optimism? So this non-reason, faith and optimism being put in the upper story, it's interesting to me. This chart is sort of parallel to the God Who Is There, but is found later on in Schaeffer's How Should We Then Live? And where he puts the non-reason, faith, optimism versus the lower reason, pessimism. And because when people have to face the realities of the real world, which are quite cold and sometimes invoke despair, then when they can't deal with that, they will jump to or take a leap in their areas of thinking into non-reason and invoke faith and this optimism that really is based off just a sort of a glass floor. It's not really anything that is substantial. And Schaeffer says about this, modern men have put various things upstairs in the area of non-reason in a desperate attempt to find some optimism about meaning and values. And so what we're seeing with the movements in atheism and this re-enchantment is really no different than that. And so as we think about this, I think one of the big things that might stand out is like what we should understand is that there is a general illogical nature underpinning all unbelief. And this was one of the things that made Schaeffer's apologetics so strong, is that he understood this and understood how to speak to it. And he says this: no non-Christian can be consistent to the logic of his presuppositions. The reason for this is simply that a man must live in reality, and reality consists of two parts: the external world and its forms, and man's mannishness, including his own mannishness. No matter what a man may believe, he cannot change the reality of what is, as Christianity is the truth of what is there. To deny this on the basis of another system is to stray from the real world. And so if you're looking for how can they get there, well, this is it. So with that, I will close, but I will just remind you all to remember, truth without love is ugly, and love without truth is compromise. And that you should always speak truth to tension, doing so graciously and with love, but speak truth to tension always. God bless.